That's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching us. You are welcome to another interesting mediation hot seat session. We're actually having, oh, 1 second. I'm sorry, I think there's a feedback here. Yes, and we're still having our trainers edition. And today we have Mrs. Caroline Nene Etuk on the hot seat. Yes, and for those of us that trained at the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse, you must have had the privilege of being taught by Mrs. Etuk. So, and for those that are just tuning in for the first time, I'm going to start off by saying that this is not a training session. This is a discussion series where we get to, first of all, try to connect with the mediator on the hot seat, to have an idea of, to connect with essence, to know why they do what they do, and to also discuss contemporary issues surrounding mediation. So please, this is it's a viewers session. So if at any point in time you have any question, feedback, or comment, you can either drop it in the comment section or you just indicate by raising your virtual hand, and we'll definitely take you. But please try to keep the questions very short. So before I get right into it, I will hand over to Miss Abby, who is my co-host for today, to read out Mrs. Etuk's bio, and then we'll get into it. Miss Abby, over to you. Yeah, Abby, are you there? Can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm honored to be doing this. I mean, I'm really honored to be doing this. So today we have with us the first DG of the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse. Her name is Caroline Nene Etuk. She's currently the director of the Enugu State Multi-Door Courthouse, an immediate past director of the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse, the first cost-connected alternative dispute resolution center in Africa, a post she held for 10 years up till 2018. She's a lawyer and an alumnus of the University of Ife, where she obtained a bachelor's degree in law, and the King's College University of London, where she obtained a master's degree in law. Mrs. Etuk has been in the vanguard of the justice sector reform for the mainstreaming of alternative dispute resolution, properly referred to as ADR, into civil justice administration. She has directed the special initiatives for the decongestion of the courts through ADR, like the Lagos Settlement Week program, first in Nigeria, and the Commercial Intervention Strategy program, which was designed to introduce ADR into the different sectors of the economy. As an internationally accredited mediator of the Center for Effective Dispute Resolution, CEDA, UK, she has successfully mediated a wide range of disputes. She is passionate about the design and development of training programs for ADR practitioners and has been involved in the training and mentoring of mediators in Nigeria and the African continent. So today is going to be packed. We are in the presence of ADR awesomeness. Fola, over to you.
Okay, thank you so very much. So please, today is not going to be the regular day of asking basic questions or those conventional questions. So we're going to hit the ground running. So Mrs. Etuk, please, can you tell us about how you found out about mediation? How did you stumble upon mediation? Like I always say, the destination is always as important as the journey. Please, how did you find out about mediation? Thank you.
Well, Fola, thank you very much for having me on the program. And thank you very much for all you have been doing to promote mediation in Nigeria and around the globe. Getting into mediation was, should I say, by divine arrangement, that just put it that way. You know, I heard about the Negotiation and Conflict Management Group. It sounded interesting, so I went and got myself registered with a group. Well, one of us told me that, they were having their first, that was in 2006, they were having their first international conference, a seminar in Abuja. And I made up my mind I was going to give some assistance. I'll just go give 1 hour a day as a volunteer to get them ready for that program. And that's how I really got involved with mediation. The program took place. I wasn't at Abuja myself, but when they returned, Mr. Enoch called me in for a chat. And that chat ended up with an appointment as a center manager. And my responsibility then was to kind of administer the center. And this I was supposed to be doing part-time from morning till about 1 o'clock, and thereafter go about my normal business. But that's where the journey started, and it hasn't ended since then. So from being center manager for, I think, 2 years or something, I became deputy director. And when Mr. Enoch stepped out from the Multi-Door Courthouse, when our law was finally promulgated in 2007, I stepped in as director of the courthouse. So it wasn't by any design of mine. Things just took their course and they just happened.
Thank you so much, Ma. So now, in trying to hit the ground running, I've always had conversations with some mediators that talk about the challenges they are facing in mediation. And I think I've heard you talk about some of the challenges you had when you started off with Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse. And when I look at the challenges you encountered then and the challenges some of them talk about right now, which is always usually around the lack of understanding and acceptance of mediation, I try to make them understand it's still not as difficult as what you might have gone through then. So for the benefit of those listening, can we please discuss about some of the challenges you had when in trying to preach the gospel and the practice of mediation, both as a practitioner and as a director, ex-director of the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse?
Well, the problems were multifaceted. Let me put it that way. There was opposition from different angles. Now, the legal community was a major one, and I don't know how Lagos is faring now, but Enugu, we are still at the nascent stages of the program, so it's expected. Now, lawyers are trained in adversarial-like advocacy. That is the training of a lawyer. Now, when you introduce a process like mediation that says, no, the lawyer doesn't necessarily have control over the process. He has his roles to play, but it's the parties' thing, okay? The parties need to drive the process. The parties need to decide on the outcomes. It becomes, for a lawyer, it becomes a totally different ballgame, and the responses are varied, all right? So that was, for me, that was one of the major problems, because the courts, we are court connected, and the courts is the business place of the lawyer. If you don't get a buy-in from the lawyer, then how do you access the African client that depends upon the lawyer, that looks up to the lawyer as, as though the lawyer was some type of a god, okay? So that was one of the problems, which we tried by advocacy to overcome. And in every jurisdiction of the world, I don't know any jurisdiction that has not had to pass that phase of opposition from the legal community. Everybody has had to cross that barrier, and it's something that takes time. There has to be the consistent push until the barrier begins to go down. It doesn't crumble in a heap in a day. It takes years and years, and in a manner of speaking, from one lawyer to the other. And the lawyers need to be brought to the fore. A lawyer needs to sit down and experience mediation to understand, oh, this process, it actually does make sense. And it can actually be profitable for me. So that's one of the problems. The other one that's, for me, it's a big issue, and it's a bigger issue than the lawyer problem, is the issue of judicial leadership. Now, if you have a chief judge that is pro-ADR, a multi-door courthouse program can be a very, very sweet journey. And that is our experience in Enugu now. It is a sweet journey. In fact, you get so much support and practically everything you ask for. Once you say, my lord, the chief judge, I would like to have so-and-so, she says, look, just put your request in writing, and she escalates it to the governor. And in no time, sometimes like 3-4 days, you get your approval, and then you can run. So judicial leadership is very, very important. Where a chief judge of the state, who is the actual, well, he's the, should I say, the alter ego, or the chief judge by the multi-door courthouse law has oversight over the program, and it makes sense for that to be the case. But if the chief judge is not interested in the multi-door courthouse program, then it doesn't go well. I know at least 3 multi-door courthouse programs that are actually shut down now because the judicial leadership is lacking, and the chief judges are still trying to wrap their heads around what exactly is going on here, and how does it fit in. So those are 2 major problems. Of course, the other one is the creation of awareness, where there's adequate funding for multi-door courthouse. Proper awareness can be created. So basically those 3, and there's a national issue that is having that is casting a shadow on the development of mediation in Nigeria as a whole, and that is the fact that we don't even have an ADR policy on mediation, like countries like Kenya, or maybe the OHADA group of countries. So basically those are some of the challenges that program have.
Okay. Now, most times we ask this question to get different perspective from different mediators we have on the hot seat, and every now and then they come up with answers that just bring up other questions. Now, by way of trying to expand the narrative of the judicial leadership, I would have assumed, and I may be wrong, that especially using Lagos as a case study, that in view of the number of cases that we have in court, and in trying to decongest the courts, to have serious cases, why wouldn't there be an embrace of mediation to even distill the serious ones from the unserious ones? I would like to hear your perspective on that, for them to see us as a way of, that's it.
Well, that case question typically, would be a question that the chief judge himself should be able to answer. Why are you not why you're not giving support to this program, despite the fact that, there are obvious benefits that come out from having, a program like this within the judiciary. Now, my take would be, number one, perhaps judicial leadership is not as well informed, all right, about the multi-door courthouse and how it functions and what the benefits might be. Another thing is that most of the judges at that level have like 1, sometimes 2 or 3 years before they exit from the judiciary, all right? And I think for some of them, it's a matter of, do I have the time and the capacity to take on an additional program in this time I have? Would I just want to make my mark with what's on ground and how I can improve what's on ground or whatever the case. Now, if you have also senior lawyers that are for different reasons, one of the reasons, of course, like we all know, which is not so often talked about, is the fact that the lawyers feel that processes like ADR would affect their bottom line. Okay? If you have senior lawyers in a jurisdiction, advise the chief judge that, you know, we don't need a program like this. It probably just go with them. So for whatever reasons, but the truth is that it does really happen that in some jurisdictions, multi-door courthouses have actually been closed down, you know, because the chief judges were just not in support, or they were not prepared at the time, you know, to get involved in those programs. So those would be my answers. It would be interesting if somebody ran a survey, for instance, you know, to elicit more information on the thinking at that level. It would be interesting to see what the outcomes, you know, probably may be.
Okay, now, as a trainer, and I would like to know what your observations have been teaching practitioners and end users mediation. What have you been able to notice? Is it that people don't understand the benefits of let's first put lawyers aside, because they're always the first port of call. But based on your conversation with the user, with the end users, why do you think a lot of them have not been able to see the benefits of mediation, to appreciate it for what it is, vis-a-vis cost-saving, business relationships, and all of that? So when you teach them, what is that general feedback you get every now and then that you feel needs to be discussed and worked on?
Well, with respect to training, my experience has been that you'd find in a class, a mediation skills training that has maybe 30 to 36 participants. At least, I'd say at least 80% of those would be lawyers. 85% of those would be lawyers. Now you find the occasional doctor, the occasional accountant, and maybe the occasional businessman, the occasional CEO of an organization, and all that. Now, I don't know whether it has to do with the way that the trainings are advertised, perhaps. Number two, when we advertise, what is our catchment audience? The truth is that a lot of our advertising is done within the legal community. Okay? Now, I don't know of any time, even in Enugu here, where we said we've had 2 mediation skills trainings. We've had one in 2019, and the second one we had March this year. I can't ever remember us going into maybe the territory of the accountants and, you know, marketing the training. It's always been on legal platforms and that sort of thing. So I think that perhaps is number one. Number two would be the fact that at the stage at which we are in our experience as a nation that is running, that has mediation as an alternative to litigation, we are still very, 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 very at the very, very, very initial stages. You know, look at, for instance, apart from the court programs, how many private, well-established private mediation programs do we have? They are very, very lacking. Now in Lagos, for instance, the top law firms would have, basically their practice would be perhaps a litigation practice, but they would always have a unit, arbitration and ADR unit, which is, you know, but they are not full-fledged mediation organizations. So we are still at that place where the process has to be grown in civil society. People need to know that, you know, this works, this process works, you know, like you have in other developed countries like the UK and the US. You know? So a lot of work still needs to be done. Now, my deep desire and my thoughts every day is, how do we get around this? How do we get around this? What do we do to push this forward? I had an opportunity of talking to a group, well, somebody from a group, Chief Agbakoba's group, that's working on the arbitration policy for Nigeria. And, you know, and I told the gentleman, I said, look, the mediation also needs to take a high ground, and we need to have a national mediation policy so that creates the framework where private entrepreneurs and private individuals and institutions get involved in mediation, using those guidelines as a reference point. So I think basically is where we are. Things would definitely pick up, you know, and it's the same problem, you know, we don't have many ad hoc mediations. A lot of the mediations are institutionalized. All right, so mediation is not really out in the market now. Otherwise, mediators, we should be doing more work and earning some good money from, you know, from doing cases, all kinds of cases. So that's work to be done, and it's not going to be done by government or anybody else. It's going to have to be organized, initiated, synthesized by the mediation community itself. So
Great.
basically,
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for that. You actually answered the question I was going to ask, which was a follow-up from your conversation with Fola. So I just would like to ask, so comparing Lagos to Enugu, where you currently are, you've mentioned that we have in Enugu, you have a chief judge who is amenable to mediation and ADR. If the chief judge of Lagos State, actually, let me ask, before I say this, let me ask, is there a pre-action protocol like what we have in Lagos State, in Enugu, as part of the high court rules?
In our high court rules,
yes,
yes, we have a pre-action protocol. But of course, you know that the pre-action protocols, that they don't actually work. They are not implemented as they ought to be.
Okay, because I was actually reading through what we have in Lagos, and it's almost a page and a half for the 2019 rules. And I was in conversation with a senior lawyer over the week, and the practice is they sit down and discuss, and then they do a letter saying, oh, we've attempted mediation. I'd like to find out if that's the same thing in Enugu and how it's dealt with.
Well, the pre-action protocols, the rules in most, I guess, in a lot of jurisdictions, we have pre-action protocols, but those rules, they actually don't work. You know?
So why are they there?
No, if they work, it's very, very simple. It's beautiful. And the pre-action protocols were borrowed from the UK civil procedure rules, okay? Now, if the pre-action protocols work, if lawyers actually, in obedience to the protocols, they engage with the parties and counsel on the other side and have a proper negotiation over the matter, you'd find out that lots of the matters that go to court would not actually be there in the first place. But what happens in actual practice is that since it's one of the prerequisites for starting a matter, for initiating a case, so you just do the relevant letter and then you file your case and go on with your matter. Now, I've not read the 2019 rules for Lagos, okay? But my take is that if the pre-action protocols work and you file a matter with filling the requisite forms, saying we have attempted mediation, we have attempted negotiations, we have attempted this, and the parties still did not settle. Then the court should not, for any reason, refer that matter to mediation, because what it simply says is that the ground has been covered. Mediations have been initiated, the process has failed. Now, for the court to refer that matter again to a multi-door courthouse would be to elongate the lifespan of the case, and it's needless. Now, it works in the UK. You know, people obey the protocols and they do what they are supposed to do, and the impact is felt on the judicial system. But that's not the case here. So it's a matter of now who is going to ensure that that is done. You know, the protocols need to be enforced as they should be. So that's just my take about that. There's no point having provisions in the rules that nobody is really doing anything about. Well, we have it there for the sake of saying, oh, we have the protocols, you know, this is a very good reform initiative. Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's another issue that's going to take a long time for us to get into enforcement of those. Would you say the issue with the lack of acceptance of mediation by lawyers is a function of the fact that from the get-go, from university through law school, it's an adversarial mindset? And if it's yes, which is, I'm thinking it would be, what is the solution to this problem?
Well, the solution simply is to change the mindset. And how do you change the mindset? You change the mindset by educating people and empowering them, you know, to deploy the alternative processes. Now, that's what training like the mediation advocacy training is supposed to achieve. It's supposed to achieve, the lawyers are supposed now to know that, okay, if I'm litigating, I'm a lawyer, I'm a good advocate, I need to do the best I can for my client. But if I'm in a mediation environment, I don't have to behave like a litigator. I have to behave like a mediation advocate. So who is a mediation advocate? What does the mediation advocate do? What are the benefits accruing to a mediation advocate? So those are all the questions that educating the lawyers is supposed to achieve. Now, that is at the back end. Now, the front end is what happens in the law schools. All right? What happens in the law schools? How well are lawyers prepared to have a full, not a partial education in law, but a full, you know, spectrum, well-versed education. You're taught to be a good litigator, and then you're taught also to be a good negotiator, you know, so that you come out from law school not having a bias for one against the other, but being, you know, like you're standing on your 2 feet, you're complete.
A robust, wide spectrum coverage of all aspects of resolution.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ma. I have one more question. The name, we say alternative dispute resolution. Would you consider them, so all of them, alternatives, especially mediation? Would you consider it an alternative? Because there's a huge misconception about mediation. First, there's that it's the lesser, it's the weak. When you go to mediation, you're going from a weak point. You know, you don't have a good case, or you're scared of XYZ. Would you say this, mediation is an alternative? Because when you say an alternative, then you're saying it's either or. So you really have that option. You can choose.
Well, the point you're raising, I've heard somebody canvass this point, that alternative is not an appropriate word. Their alternative presupposes that that alternative is an inferior one to the actual thing. But that's not the sense in which this is being used. When it says alternative, it means you have litigation on one side, and then the other processes that are available to a disputant or a litigant are the alternatives to the litigation, not necessarily that it's inferior, not necessarily that it's inferior. I guess it's just, it's a matter, it's a nomenclature, it's a matter of semantics as far as I'm concerned. You understand? So mediation.
Yes, but that's because you are, you know, yes, you are, you are, I mean, hello, you know exactly what the options are, you know what the differences are. But for someone who has never heard about it and who just says, oh, you know what, I hear ADR and I hear of alternatives. So because we have a litigation or litigious mindset, the first option for most people is, I'm going to sue you to court, I'm going to have my lawyer call you, or, but there's no platform, for lack of a better word, for mediation.
Well, for advocating mediation, that's what you mean. Yes. Now, it's a responsibility that everybody has, okay? It's everybody's responsibility to show people. A lot of people have tasted of the litigation pie, and they will testify themselves that it was unpleasant, all right? It was lengthy, it was tedious, it was time-consuming, it was expensive, and it did not guarantee me an outcome that was what really meets my intrinsic interest in the matter. All right? You can get a judgment, and your judgment is like sour grapes. You have a judgment, but that's not really what you want. Now, on the other hand, mediation, I always tell people when they make an argument, I say, why don't you? The taste of the pudding is in the eating. Taste the mediation first, okay? And then you can find out whether truly you can validate your objections or not. Taste the mediation first. Mediation empowers you. And what is more, I mean, with all the democratic tenets globally, everybody is moving towards democracy. This is in the same vein. Take your destiny in your hands, for heaven's sake, and craft your own judgment. Now, in the Multi-Door Courthouse Forum, we would pass that judgment onto the court to be adopted. We would pass those settlements onto the court to be adopted as a consent judgment in your case. So you come, you take a decision, you interface with the other party. Okay, you appraise and look at all the options, and then you agree on something, you take it to the court, and then you hold your judgment in your hand. As quick and as simple and as less complicated as that. That's how far it gets. So it's just a matter of time. It's building up. My take is that there's not enough push and effort coming from the quarters that matter. All right, so that mediation and mediators, come into their own in terms of, practice and all that.
I agree with you. Thank you so much for that. Paula, I'm done. Thank you so much,
okay, then. So, Ma, we're moving to the second session that I enjoy the most. It's called the table shaking session, where I give a perspective on something, and my own perspective, subjective perspective, and you get to react to it. Now, based on the business and practice of mediation and what I've been able to observe so far, and this is now juxtaposing this with the average Nigerian, because because we need to first of all appreciate that we are first of all very unique. I'm careful to choose my words. So by being very, very unique, that means that the standard test of how mediation should be like, if we decide to adhere strictly to it based on some certain levels, it may not necessarily work here. Because if we look at some of the standards, now that's the first part. Now, the second part again is this. by default, we are litigious. And if we are not forced to do something, we will not do it. Now, more often than not, the first port of call clients meet are the lawyers. So that's always the first brick wall. And mediation is supposed to be party-driven. So when the clients and the end users are meeting the lawyers that don't believe in the process, definitely, because they have paid the lawyers, it's always a bit difficult to make them see the benefits. So the first question I'm going to ask flowing from this is this: what are your thoughts on mandatory mediation? Don't you think, in view of the peculiar nature that we are in, without trying to adopt the European or universal sense of mediation, that mediation, first of all, should be made mandatory, if not for anything at all, to even drag the end users to the water, to the river, and give them the choice of drinking? Because that is always the problem. That's the first one. Then the second one, again, is the issue of cultural intelligence and the mindset. The mindset is basically litigious. The mindset is that it has to do with the fact that we believe that a decision has to be taken. Now, when we marry that into the concept of even the mediation styles we adopt in mediation, evaluative, facilitative, transformative, in reality, when push really comes down to shove, a lot of us have a mixture of some of these styles. So my point is that in bringing everything home, don't you think that we should actually discountenance whatever mediation, whatever concept of European mediation we've been taught, and come up with our own African concept of mediation, authentic mediation for Africa by Africans, that just maybe, when we do, it might change. Because there's no way we can be using the European style of mediation all in the name of trying to achieve neutrality, not for mediation not to be seen as voluntary and all of that, and think that we'll achieve the same result. So this is my own radical thought. And I feel it's also one of the things that is hindering the growth of mediation. So I would like to hear your thoughts on this, especially on the concept of the African style of mediation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fola. Well, some of these things are really ongoing discussions in many quarters, and if you ask me, I would not say discountenance the mediation style or the mediation processes as we've received them from, international best practice. I don't know if it would be wise to do that, all right? I remember when I did CEDA, I think must have been in 2006 or something. One thing I always clearly remember when I'm training, and I never fail to say that to the trainees, is that follow the process works. Now, on the first level, there's a process that has been tried and tested under various circumstances, and the science of it works. So on a base level, I think for every mediator practicing within this climb, we need to get the basic. This is international best practice. It has its own benefits. Now you find out that something happens when you're engaged in mediation, when you're growing in the practice in terms of having different case scenarios to handle, dealing with different types of parties from different backgrounds and all that. You begin to pick and choose what works in a certain environment. So it's not like you're sitting down there, you've just done CEDA, and it's like hook, line, and sinker. CIDA is a facilitative form of mediation. You have to be facilitative, you don't have to be evaluative. You can sit at a mediation table and you can express depending on what you think is going to get you good results and enhance the outcomes in the process. You can be facilitative, you can be evaluative, you can be therapeutic, you can, different models. There are like 7 different models, known models of mediation. Okay, so it's the what I'm most concerned about, more than having a distinct African concept of mediation, is to have mediators grow in competence, mastery of the process, all right? So generally, as a mediation community, we need to step up our game, all right, into the marketplace and beyond. As an individual mediator, like you have in the UK, you have people that have distinguished themselves in mediation, and they are called master mediators. And of course, they don't earn the same fees like, you know, any other mediators. So I think that is important. Competence and mastery of the mediation process. I think it would get us somewhere if, as a mediation community, we are known, even in cross-border mediations, international mediations, we are known to have that level of sophistication, then it works for us. Now, if you say an African concept of mediation, it's a good thing to pursue. But you see, Africa itself is so diversified. You have the Francophone, you have the Lusophone, you have the Anglophone Africa. You know, so when you say Africa, where do you really start? You know, where do you really start? You have the Arab nations, they have their own mediation practices that align with Islamic law, you know, and it's so varied. So where do you really start? You know, like the Rwanda issue, the Gacaca courts, for instance, you know, Rwanda had a problem and they came up with a solution that worked for them. That's fine. You understand? Because the peculiarities of the issues within that environment, and they dealt with, and that's fine. But that is notwithstanding, Rwanda has, you know, like regular mediation programs like we have, you know, all over the place. So that's my take on that. Now, the second thing you talked about is whether mediation should be mandated or not. There are different schools of thought. I belong to the school of thought that says mandate mediation. Otherwise, you're not going to get much done, all right? Now, the civil law countries in the US, mediation is mandatory. You have to take a mediation step before you even access the courts, you know? So people may not, you know, say, oh, you can't force people to go to settlement, you know, like you said, you can drag the horse to the water, okay? You drag it to the water, but since I don't wound it on the way to the water, just take the horse to the water. When you have reached the water, now that's where the rubber meets the road. What next? And that what next is the crucial thing, because the mediators that know their onions, that is where they step up. And a party that was so reluctant to get there, once the party gets there, the party is in your, what should I say? The party is in your power. So then you now persuade the party to give mediation a shot. And when you succeed in doing that, more often than not, the party says, thank you for this opportunity. It's been an extremely insightful experience. We will do it again, you know. But if the party is allowed to make an, you know, make a decision without exposure, you don't know why, you don't want mediation, your lawyer tells you that mediation will take away your day in court and all those sort of reasonings. Bring the party in, and you can do this by legislation. So that's for me. Now, Frank Sanders, he was the founder of the multi-door courthouse concept. He took, in this controversy, Sanders took a middle ground, and he said, he called it something called the temporary expedient. He says, impose mandatory regulations to compel parties to attempt mediation. When the jurisdiction becomes, or wherever, becomes more accustomed now to how mediation works, you can now remove the mandatory rules. But it's expedient to do that, because people naturally would not flow through to something new. So that's my take on both of those issues. I think we should, yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, another controversial question, and we all practice mediation as a way of life, and even though till today, I'm always still a bit baffled at the fact that everybody at some point in time has practiced mediation with his children, with his spouses, and all of that, and they have seen that it is not all the time that they throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I struggle with the fact that when you practice a system that works, if you now decide to take it on a more structured level, why you feel that it has to be, you have to be at loggerheads to have someone taking a decision that would ultimately favor you. But that is not my question. My question is this. Now, I think anyway, that the founding fathers of institutional mediation that infused the word non-binding in the definition of what mediation is now, which is supposed to be a shield, has now become a sword that always comes up when people don't want to embrace mediation. And every time we have to keep explaining to them that mediation is binding, it is not non-binding. So from the top of my head, I'm trying to understand what the concept of non-binding is within the framework of mediation, and why it should even be put in the definition of what mediation is, because it is now looking like a sword rather than a shield. I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, the issue of the concept is not something that I've ever even given a thought to. Maybe because of my background of institutional mediation. I mean, when you come to a mediation and you have an agreement, and the agreement is set down. An agreement is an agreement. The parties endorse the agreement, and it becomes a binding contract. So I don't know the non-binding concept. Does it mean that after the negotiation, the parties can just say, oh, okay, we agree, but we don't commit ourselves in writing and walk away? I don't understand what it means truly. And I think some of these things were in an attempt to make the process seem very informal, very flexible, all this. I don't know, Fola, honestly. I don't know. For my background, because you come in and you fill forms, for instance, you fill an agreement to mediate. And the process in the multi-door courthouses, after the mediation, if the mediation fails, then, there's no agreement. But if the mediation succeeds, the mediation is going to be reduced into writing. I know in my lifetime of practicing mediation, I've had 2 or 3 cases where it was ridiculous having to tell the parties, okay, let's write it down. That was fine. The parties went away happily. But in the main, you really need to get the agreement into writing, and the parties sign a binding contract. And that contract can be enforced. Now, in the multi-door courthouse, everything is made easier. If it's a walk-in matter, you simply go to the agile judge and it's adopted as the judgment of court. If it's a court-referred matter, you go back to the referral court, and the referral court adopts the settlement as the judgment of court. That is easy. But if you're not in a structured institutional environment and you have a contract, then you should, you have an agreement, then you should reduce the agreement into writing and let it be made a contract. Now in Lagos, for instance, you can take that agreement to the multi-door courthouse, register it for the purpose of having it before an ADR judge. So I don't subscribe to that, binding, non-binding, and all those sort of terminology. I don't know,
Okay then, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and please, if you have any question, feedback, or comments, kindly indicate by raising your hand. Now, someone just took this question out of my mouth, and I'll just I'll read the question out and expand the narrative, and it goes thus. The various multi-door courthouses organize MSTs, and there are other local training institutions. It appears to me that there is an urgent need, yes, to regulate and set a standard on mediation skills training. Now, that is another elephant in the room, standards in mediation. Now, more than half of us here are students of your teachings, and we all know that the multi-door courthouse holds participants to a very high standard where the teaching of mediation is concerned. Everyone knows that. So it's really very easy to know someone that has been trained by the multi-door courthouse and someone that has been trained elsewhere, even though there are some, So my question now is this. In view of the fluidity of mediation and the fact that we don't exactly have a law per se guiding who trains mediation, who doesn't train mediation and all of that, when, no longer if, when mediation takes its pride of place as the preferred means of dispute resolution, don't you think this standard may come back and haunt us? Or not, this non-standard of this non-standard, so to say, don't you think it may come back to haunt us?
Well, Shola, Fola, that's I don't know whether it will haunt us or not, but I'll just say what I have to say. This thing about standardizing mediation practice, it's big controversy, generated a lot of controversy internationally, A lot of people say, we cannot regulate mediation practice because you're going to stifle the flexibility and the creativity of the process. Others say, like you have said, something needs to be done about mediation practice so that charlatans don't take over the ground. Training of mediators.
That's what I'm talking about. Training of mediators, standardization of training.
Yeah, I would think that the most consensus has been on the training of the mediators. I don't know who is going to take up that responsibility. All right. So far, the court ADR programs, which includes all of us, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, Federal High Court, Industrial Court, the multi-door courthouses, etc. Our position has been, I can speak very clearly for all the multi-door courthouses that train. Our position has been train mediators for your use. Okay? Now, there's one major training institution, and when we've taken their curriculum and compared it with the court training curriculums, we find out that one is skewed towards having an overall broad-based academic appraisal of mediation. We at the Multi-Door Courthouse, we cannot afford an overall appraisal. The mediators are going to engage in live mediations, and we want results. We want settlements. We want to meet our targets. So we train mediators with that perspective in mind. We take the high ground in a manner of speaking. We take the high ground in a manner of speaking. Now, we are at the verge of reconvening the Association of Multi-Door Courthouses of Nigeria. so that we can start, being more focused in our service delivery and in all the things that we are mandated to do. So we would always have our trainings, because our trainings are going to serve our purpose. So that's on one hand. Now, if you come to the private sector now, who is going to take that responsibility? It's important to have some definite, So who is going to take that responsibility? The starting point for me is that we do need a mediation policy, a national mediation policy. That's a guideline. It can even address training, like the Kenya policy is very elaborate. It addresses ADR in sectors, specific sectors. All right? Now, I know the oil and gas industry has just started an ADR program. The electricity industry has some sort of, I don't really know, the telecoms people do have, but we have to have a national policy that is all-embracing and that addresses the issue of the minimum requirements for mediation trainers, mediation training. Okay. Like if you go to, maybe you do a 20-hour week, for instance, and you say, oh, I'm an accredited mediator of so and so. International best practice is 40 hours. I mean, if you are to engage at any level as a mediator and you are going to be screened, internationally, they want to know if you have done at least 40 hours of mediation training. Now the multi-door courthouses have escalated that to 48 hours plus a 6-month mentorship. Without the mentorship, you cannot even be on our panel of neutrals. We know we too have there's a lot of work to be done, Paula, So who is going to bail the cat? It has to start somewhere, and it's a conversation that we need to continue to have until it builds up sufficient momentum.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ken's hand is up. I'm going to unmute you. Let's have your feedback.
To crystallize into something definite. Policy. We can't.
Okay then. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Ken, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Fola. It's a good program. Thank God I'm here. Now, our guest dropped one word which really triggered something in me, and that's the word creativity. And someone was asking about alternative. Alternative is actually that's what creativity is all about. In thinking, for instance, logical thinking, critical thinking, it got to a point where it was discovered it wasn't enough. There was need for creative thinking out of the box, and that, So, and that is the finest moment for me in mediation is this creativity aspect. And so, concerning mediation and standardization also, I think we should just be patient with it. Mediation is one of our lost legacies that we are beginning to regain. Mediation is not another export from England or America, no. Mediation is the way we had been settling. Every culture had their way of settling disputes. And disputes will exist just as it has existed in all cultures. Okay, so for me, ADR is African mediation, African dispute resolution. Yes, that's what we used to, joke about when we began the MST1 training, 2009, thereabout. So I think we have to be patient for it to re-enter, because it's like, when a prisoner had been indoors in detention for so many years, when you release him. Even he begins to walk like a baby because he doesn't even know anywhere to go in the first place. Yes, but then awareness.
No, please continue. We can hear you.
Is critical, like in the universities and all. For instance, I local standard will be built on. But if we destroy, we don't have any standard at all. We are looking on to foreigners, to Europe, to tell us to go right or go left. Oh my God. So let's be patient with the culture that is coming back. It's our own way of settling things. I would prefer that you lead me into the heart and mind of the German than telling me about the Irishman, because I have more to do with the with the Fulani, with the Etuk, the Efik, or the Idoma. Let's have our own national standard of doing things. You know, so that's just what the comment I want to make. That it's a creative thing, and there is need to come out of standardization, as you know, slowly and slowly and steadily come out of standardization, which says one size fits all. That was in the first place what brought the fatigue into litigation. Litigation, you know, came to a fatigue, and that's why people had to look around and say, yes, there's something like an alternative. Okay, let's do it this way. It's not a Nigerian thing. Then in the training session, they told us the court system in the world was congested. So that led to the, you know, pursuit of an alternative, you know. So it's not, the litigation is okay, but it's not enough.
Thank you so much. Ma'am, before you respond to what, I'm so sorry, Abby. Before Mrs. Etuk responds to what Mr. Ken said, Mr. Ogudu, please, we'll take your hand. He used one word, and we are still going to build a narrative around it. Mediation as a lost legacy. That's very powerful. So I don't know. Do you agree? I would like to hear your thoughts on what he had just said and that concept of mediation being a lost legacy vis-a-vis the explanation he gave.
Well, I'm not very vast in what used to be. All right. I can say, for instance, I've never had an opportunity to be in an elders forum in a village setting, okay, and all over the world, I believe that there were ways of resolving disputes, you know, as far back even as biblical times. I remember scripture says that Moses used to sit from morning till night judging the people until his father-in-law told him that, look, man, you're going to weary yourself. This work is too heavy for you. Appoint leaders and assign responsibilities so that only the most difficult task would come to you for mediation, for settlement. Now in Enugu, more than in Lagos, you find out that at some point in many mediations, not all of them, the people say to you, we can't go further because we need to take this matter that had already been discussed by our kinsmen. We want to take it back to what they call the umonna. The umonna are like the men in the family, the men in the family, the extended family. And the umonna is a very, very powerful institution here in the East. So, and when such a request comes, of course, as a mediator, you know, you encourage the parties to go to their umonna and to have whatever the relevant discussions are and to come back. I, as a mediator, have had chiefs sit beside me, one on my left and one on my right, and I had to instruct them that that they were here to assist me in the mediation and not to take sides with the parties. So there are a lot of things that are done here. Quite a lot of variations are introduced into the mediation practice. But like I said, and sometimes you find that they go and return and the umuna is polarized. You know, somebody says, oh, they are supporting him because he's rich and he has given them money. So there are all those sort of things, all right? Like I said before, I am content to go on with best practice, to adapt it as peculiar situations require, to introduce whatever measure of creativity is required into the mediation, and to ensure at the end of the day that the parties have qualitative outcomes and their opportunity at the mediation table was maximized. That's my position now, okay? It might change, but as I speak, that is my position now. You know, I want to go forward. I want to take those things that are beautiful about traditional and cultural practices along with me. But I don't want to go back if that's what it entails. So that's my position.
Great, thank you so much, Ma. I'm just going to take a few comments. The person who has the virtual hand raised up, I'm just going to take a few comments and then I'll take your question. So there's a comment here by Justice Harriman. I entirely agree with Mrs. Etuk about the challenges being faced by ADR proponents. We still need to work on sensitization of heads of courts and lawyers who are first point of call for disputants. Aderemi Durojaye says, the rules of courts already contain provisions, we already talked about that, which require parties to have explored resolution. Sadly, this requirement is only observed as a tick-the-box item, as lawyers still file without being intentional about trying to resolve the dispute without recourse to contentious litigation. I don't believe mediation needs to be made mandatory. Rather, the system should view pre-action protocols as a formal requirement that needs to be seen to have been complied with. Would you like to make any comments on that, Ma?
I quite agree with both of them. I agree with Justice Harriman. Advocacy is key, and it needs to be not one-off. You know, like I tried myself in Enugu. I said, oh, it's only when we're going to have a settlement week that we now, you know, pour in resources into advertising. It should really be an ongoing, all year round thing, you know, so that it sticks in the psyche, you know, of the people. So I agree with her absolutely. It's most needed. And with the other lady that made a comment, yes, yeah, quite so. It's a tick in the box thing for the pre-action protocols. We don't have the required commitment, so it's like when things are handled that way, they defeat the very purpose for which they were, you know, included in the rules, and it's sad. You know. Sad.
Yes, it's quite sad. But what could, in your opinion, Ma, and from your knowledge, what could be done better to make this not a tick in the box?
Abby, I don't know. True. I don't know. Now, you know, there's a 3-month settlement conference period for people that are seeking, you know, that file divorce petitions. How many of those things really happen in all earnestness? You know, how many of those things really happen? I think the flaw probably is the expectation that lawyers would engage one with another and discuss it doesn't work like that. You know, the lawyers will not engage. They will not engage without some compulsion. So I guess the rule should be left there. The process section of the judiciary should step up. I mean, if the lawyer ticked and you're saying to the lawyer, you tick this box, have you actually had a mediation? And the lawyer says, yes, we have attempted settlement and it didn't settle. Really, what do you expect the process clerk to do? The person can just, or the lawyer could simply say to process clerk, just do your work and, you know, don't make this your business.
Yeah.
And
it's
intimidated.
Yes. Okay, so there's a question here from Loretta. It says, how effective has the Settlement Week initiative been in sensitizing the public about mediation? Because it still seems like most people don't know about mediation. That's the first part. The second part is it possible for the multi-door courthouses or mediation centers to do more TV adverts, radio jingles, etc., so the masses are informed?
It is very possible if we have money.
That's the cocoa.
That's the cocoa of the matter. Better sit now money. But I guess where there's a will, there's a way. You know, in our comeback as a multi-door courthouse association, those are some of the things we are going to have to talk about and get the National Judicial Council properly focused and involved in court ADR. So we'll see how it goes if raising funds from outside the country is also a way to go to fund ADR. And one thing I see that works for some of these countries, I'll take Kenya for instance, you know, they have just one judiciary. In fact, this awareness came, you know, had a few things doing, you know, across border. One judiciary, one chief justice of Kenya. And you know, that type of arrangement drives traction, okay? When it comes to the head, it filters down. The same thing with Ghana, the same thing with Rwanda. Now, Nigeria has 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. And it has so many judiciaries, you know, and so many, and all of us are working in silos, you know. It's like Enugu, for us, Enugu is our territory, you know. And when you cross Enugu, Anambra is my territory. And there's no traction, there's no synergy, you know. And this is what we don't want to happen to the multi-door courthouse ADR, court ADR programs. So we decided to pull forces together and see if we can have a united front. I mean, when we set standards in the multi-door courthouse, whether you're in Borno State or you're in Adamawa State, these are our standards. Nothing less. So you have to step up your game. Okay, so where there's, you know, proper funding and a proper focus on creation of awareness, you know, it's doable. It's doable.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ma. Amobi Ogudu, your hand has been up for a while. Would you please unmute yourself before I take the remaining questions? Are you there? Amobi Ogudu.
Yes, I've unmuted him. I think we should speak anywhere from now.
All right, thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Yes, I'm here.
Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'll make my content very brief. Mrs. Etuk, good to see you.
Good to see you, my brother.
Thank you, ma'am. We keep lamenting about awareness, but I'm worried about one thing. Lawyers who are mediators, most of us on this platform, when we draft agreements, contracts, you still find that people put the what I term the old school dispute resolution clause without any modification. Now, you say that in case of dispute, you go to arbitration in accordance with the arbitration law. Who would market mediation? Where is mediation in that agreement? So we have to take our destiny as mediators, take our destinies in our hands. I don't know what Mrs. Etuk thinks about. Thank you very much.
You're actually very, very correct. Amobi, you're very, very correct. You know, it's a funny phenomenon, but I'll give a typical example. We have maybe an area awareness event for lawyers, and the first one we had, we nicknamed it in Enugu here, I think that was 2019, we called it the 21st Century Lawyer, and we had about 750 lawyers in the hall that day. Now, at some point when the hall kept filling up, I was sitting at the high table, and like 2-3 people from the chief judge, and she passed a note to me. And when I went to her, she said, come. When I went to her, she said, do you have enough to feed all these people? I said, no, my lord, because we had only a budget for 500 people. So she got the accountant to disburse some money, which we used and got a few snacks to supplement what we had. Now, with that sort of outing, you would say, wow, you know, we are going to have lawyers flooding this place. You know, a lot of senior advocates, senior lawyers, they spoke. People actually spoke their minds. You know, some said, we don't know about this ADR thing. We need to look at it well. We need to get used to it. We need some training and all that. But in the most, many people affirmed the Multi-Door Courthouse initiative. They affirmed the ADR. They said, this is one of the best things that has happened in judicial reform in Enugu State, and so on and so forth. That does not translate to, my lord, this my matter has been in this court for 10 years. I would like it referred to the Multi-Door Courthouse to have the parties attempt, you know. So that is like walking the talk. It's very, very, very lacking. People will be politically correct when they need to be, but when the matter concerns you, this is your case, you hear the lawyers singing a different song, and it's also very unfortunate, you know. So that is not to say that a lot of lawyers have not come a long way with respect to their assent and their interest in ADR, you know, changing their perspective of what the process is, and now learning what best to do. How do we position ourselves so that we can make ADR also profitable? You know, I know a lot of lawyers have come a long way, but not as many as should have at this time, you know, of our national development. So that's what I want to say, you know.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma. So I have a few more comments I'll take, and then I'll hand over to Fola. So Yetunde Ladega says, how do you think the enforcement of the TOS, which is terms of settlement, can be improved as the fulfillment gets slower at this point?
I don't quite understand the question.
How do you think the enforcement of the terms of settlement can be improved as fulfillment gets slower?
Enforcement of terms of settlement, that's outside of the purview of the court, of the Multi-Door Courthouse. That's basically the third thing. Once you get your judgment, counsel should follow up and do needful to get the matter enforced. I don't know how, except I'm not understanding the question.
Okay, well, in view of time, I have a few more comments. There's a comment from Milord. Mrs. Etuk, at one point, we had created the Association of Multi-Door Courthouses. Has there been any progress?
My Lord, I'm sure you're aware that when Justice, was it Justice Kanu resigned as chairman of the Association of Multi-Door Courthouses, things really went down the road. I mean, you know, the things actually kind of disintegrated. And then, of course, the British Council program, the Justice for All program ended. So there was a funding issue. But what happened was that the directors of the multi-door courthouses had, I think, 2 meetings before that occasion, and that's the body that wants to pull things together now. We have a WhatsApp group that all the directors are subscribed to, and we're getting the non-multi-door courthouse ADR court programs involved. So I guess in a month or so, we'll have a major meeting on a major online meeting, you know, to plan going forward. But that is a commitment that every one of us has made, and everybody's quite upbeat about it, that we need to get the association back on its feet again. And my Lord, I don't know, Delta State, I don't know what's happening in Delta State, my Lord. Maybe I should call you privately to discuss that.
Yes, you can. My DG is online. He's with you. He's on this program.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. I was just asking the director for Akwa Ibom State. She promised to get me his contact numbers. Maybe I'll call afterwards and then we can talk. Yes,
okay. I will send you Namdi's number. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, my Lord.
Thank you, my Lord. So in rounding up, because you have just 6 minutes. So ma'am, we have a cross section of mediators and a cross section of end users and people interested in mediation. So based on your experience as a trainer, a facilitator, a mediator, and a mediation advocate, looking at how mediation was when you started so many years ago, where it is now, and where it will probably be in the not too distant future, what advice do you have for them? So the advice is two-pronged. First, to the mediators in active practice, and second, to the end users watching you right now.
Okay, well, for me, professionalism is key. You know, for me, professionalism is key. You know, and we need to step up our game. I just keep on I tell myself that every day. You need to step up your game. You know, the world is a global village. We need to start having on the internet platform with the technologies available. We should start getting involved in co-mediations with other mediators in other African countries. We should start doing stuff. And then I see that one great thing that is lacking is research. Now we're running a research, a couple of the SOAS University of London, the Multi-Door Courthouse, Professor Hiro Haragaki. He's a professor of the Loyola Law School in California, and a couple of others. We're running a survey on the African continent. You can't believe how difficult it is to get data, information from mediation centers, even in Nigeria. So difficult. So we need to break out of that mindset of, you know, this is the thing we do here, this is Nigeria, you know, and we need to explore the world. Nigerians are people that like to explore the world. Let mediators get up and let's start moving around. We'll start with our Jerusalem. Or is it Jericho? Jerusalem should be Nigeria, Jericho should be Africa, and then the uttermost parts of the world. So I encourage everybody that wants to jump on this bandwagon, I'll give Fola some of the details of the Africa Mediation Network. So you register on that network. We are having a conference. We are having a platform on the Arbitration in Africa conference. The 5th session is in Morocco, Casablanca, Morocco, in November. And at that conference, the mediation committee is going to present a report of mediation centers in Africa. So if you know any private centers, any government-owned centers, please just send the information to Fola so that we can send them questionnaires, because it's going to be a very, very comprehensive report, and we're going to have a directory of all those organizations attached to the report. So let's do stuff, we need to make this all very exciting.
Thank you so much. Now, my final question is this, ma'am. Outside the multi-door courthouses that mediators are assigned to mediate cases, can you please suggest other streams of income for mediators for them to be able to, basically about the bottom line? So I'd please like you to please expand on that. Other streams of income for mediators.
Well, other streams of income for mediators, what comes to my mind right away is mediation out of the courthouse.
That's private mediation?
Multi-door courthouses, ADR programs around the world don't pay a lot of money to mediators. They just don't have the money to pay. So we need to create business. We need to build the market outside of the multi-door courthouse so that we do our thing and we get properly remunerated. Okay? So, well, getting into organizations, for instance, and there was a story, it's not something that I've explored before, but where there are issues, controversies, workplace disputes in organizations, mediators can introduce themselves to those organizations and help them restructure by using their mediation skills, to bring some sanity and order and things like that. But Fola, that's something that both of us, we need to talk about. Let's talk about it and see what the possibilities are, at least for now. Let's find out what the possibilities are, put it out there so that, whatever fits you, you can begin to explore. But we need to be very, very dynamic, and we need to reach out. Everywhere that there's a dispute, there's a potential for business there for you.
Wow, now that was a very powerful statement. So thank you so very much, ma'am, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today. We truly appreciate this. It's been educative, it's been insightful, and it's been powerful. Thank you very much. And I don't know whether I have any final words to people listening to you today before we call it a day.
Well, just keep the mediation flag flying high. Okay, we have something that is new and dynamic. Okay, so let's create. That's what mediation teaches us. Let's create opportunities. All right, and I'll say God bless you all, and thank you for being part of the family.
Thank you so very much, ma. So next
week, please, are you talking to Fola only, ma?
No, everybody now.
No, I'm talking to Miss Etuk, because I heard that Fola.
No, for everybody, for everybody.
It's for everybody.
Okay, jealous. Everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we appreciate you.
Yeah, so next week, Saturday, 5 p.m. prime time, we'll be having another seasoned mediator and trainer in the person of Mr. Kenneth Onyema. So he's going to be on the hot seat. So please, let's endeavor to tune in 5 p.m. every Saturday. Then upper Saturday, July 10, we're going to be having another mock mediation session. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. It's going to be a bit explosive. It's matrimonial, and we'll be having no other than Venerable Femi Johnson as the mediator of the day. So please tune in, and thank you so much for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week, Saturday. God bless and have a lovely one. And thank you so much, Mr. Etuk. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. God bless you all. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. See you next Saturday.